I will turn it over to Greg.
Sure. Thank you all. And I'm probably going to talk to you guys because they've heard me talk a lot. And Jess, you're going to give us a slideshow. So this is what we'll go over tonight was work that we started intermiss about a year ago. And some of you may have been at the joint meeting we did 4 or 5 months ago, 6 months ago. And so some of the in the beginning may feel a little bit redundant. But if we take our time, we'll understand how we get to the step of submitting a statement of interest. And we'll talk a bit at the end of this about the state side of the process and how you get involved in that. But as it started, we always take a master plan as 3 steps to understanding what a district may need. And it's, what do you own now? What do you teach? And who do you teach? So facilities, curriculum, and students. Then what are the district's needs? So we look at what you own, what condition it's in, how big it is, how it fits for what you're doing, where you're going demographically and enrollment-wise, and where you're going curriculum-wise as things evolve. And then the last part was, how do you best address any identified needs? So the first 2 steps grew out of and were intrinsically part of the facilities assessment. That's what you own. And we'll spend a little bit of time on those because those are the pieces that we talked about the last time. So as part of facilities assessment, when we started in, we understood that there was some feeling that the district might not be doing as well as it ought to be in certain areas. So we did an online poll that went out to all the students, all the parents of students, and all the staff. And we asked them, I think it was about 12 or 14 questions. We also looked at historical data. We did a demographic enrollment projection, and we visited all the facilities. Now, if you download this from the links, you'll also get links in this to the full assessment study, which is 160 something pages, the demographic study, and one of the presentations that we did that we'll talk about a little bit later on. So positive feedback from students, parents, and teachers is pretty uniform, was the level of communication between the district and its staff and students, the athletic fields, and the lack of crowding of facilities, which kind of flatter to deceive because the schools are essentially undercrowded. So everyone feels more comfortable in a building that is working under its capacity. And some aspects of the curricular offerings, and those were the newer offerings that were looking a little bit more towards career and college readiness and trying to make a break from what was being offered traditionally. The negative input was the condition of the facilities, the age and configuration of the facilities, the lack of technology, lack of heating, lack of air conditioning. So the downside, almost consistently through the district, was the physical nature of the buildings and how they did or did not work. The most prevalent themes as an asset was the staff, the good communication, the opinion of the facilities, the fields, and the playgrounds. So though they may be run down, they were comfortable. And that's back to how many people are in it. The challenge is that it's all the physical side. They're old. They have heat that doesn't work. They don't have air conditioning. They don't have technology. There's a bunch of things on the physical side that were causing some problems for people. And if we look at the existing conditions that we have here, this is Millville, and I apologize, our slide is not all the way up on it. Millville is, in generally, we'll say good condition. You see a lot of aging out of materials, the sidewalks, the paving, the parking lots, the playgrounds. So we're starting to get the things that will need to be addressed or will need to be fixed before they start to become a physical or tripping hazard, a hazard to a child, a hazard to a student or a car being driven. I think we can get ourselves centered here.
We stop the share momentarily and they're going to switch over to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, we'll go really smooth. Should just be a minute.
Okay, so Millville, we see playground, accessibility to playground, the fall zones, all those things that start to worry both administrators and kids and parents about potential injury. Perhaps most telling is the lower right-hand corner, which is an exit door that doesn't have a connection to any kind of solid surface. You step out onto that piece and then you can't get to a parking lot or an area of refuge. Those are code issues which can be fixed. It's a sidewalk, but it's the type of thing that we're looking for when we do a facilities assessment. Now, the complex is a bit older and is struggling on the accessibility side. So the upper left-hand picture there is the auditorium, which doesn't meet our accessibility codes either under ADA or the Mass Architectural Barriers or Accessibility Board. So we have, you have some work to do at JFK and the complex to get that building back to compatibility or compliance with all the codes that apply for a school. Taking them into different uses, there's different codes that apply and different uses that apply. So there are ways to make buildings more functional for us. This building is our newest building, coming up on about 18, 20 years old, aging quite well. It's working pretty well. It was built for a much larger population, and we'll circle back to that in a few slides here. It is holding up pretty well. It's showing some what we consider to be typical things with the flooring and whatnot. We know the windows have been an issue in most of the building, big portions of the building since it was built, which was a problem not with the design or the installation, but with the actual product. And it was a bunch of time spent trying to track down that contractor when it first happened, and to no avail, unfortunately. They are weather tight, they're just not as nice to look through, and they're not as energy efficient as they should be. And then finally to the high school, which when it was designed and built was a nice example of a good high school. It has probably a preponderance of accessibility issues that stack up on top of construction methods that were used back in the 60s and 70s that aren't really holding up. And if you get a chance to tour the building with someone who knows it, I encourage you to do so and look at, though it looks fairly sound from the parking lots, it's starting to really show its age and deteriorate quite a bit. The lower right-hand photo is probably the best one in terms of curriculum moving past an old building. That's one of the old science labs, which would have an uphill struggle to really work as a science lab in a modern high school. It's an outdated arrangement for teaching science and not really what the National Science Teachers Association or even OSHA is looking for in a science lab anymore. So we did what we call a capital investment projection. So if you take a program where you're going to project what you need to spend on a building over the next 20 years, and then put that together for all of your buildings, we're projecting out somewhere in the range north of $45 million over 20 years. And that's just to keep the buildings as they are. That's not addressing any of the curricular needs or space needs. It's just to take care of what's in the buildings and what might need to be fixed. Some of those projects would qualify for grants if there's a grant program available for them. Quite a few of the projects would not qualify for grants. Yes, sir.
Brad Weissman, Blackstone Finance. Can you repeat the numbers of slide to slide?
Sure. We see in the next, between 2021 when the assessment was done and 2025, we're projecting somewhere just south of 30 million. And then between 2030 and 2040, we're coming up to about another 32 million. So what's that put us about 60 million?
Could I got a paper copy of the assessment. That says it was in draft form.
Yep.
Have you completed the thing? Okay. Have you changed your description of the high school groups in that?
I believe we did fix that, yes, sir.
Okay. When was the study completed?
I believe that we put a bow on that in August. So, because I think we met with your joint committee in June or July. and then went back through.
What I'm still seeing out in the draft copy that I got
Mhm.
was still a draft copy
Okay.
a couple of months ago.
Okay, check the link, and I will do the same. If it's still saying draft, but I posted that yesterday.
Okay. And
To the
in
link that's in the
copy
study.
I got,
Mhm.
it showed in one place the roofs in the high school in good condition,
Right,
and another case that they needed on that little blue one for 2021.
right,
A couple of $1 million of urgent
Mhm.
need.
right.
Because didn't catch on to the fact that we had done a new roof on the high school.
Yep. Yeah, I got that, and I'm pretty sure we caught that, but if it's not, if the text on the link is not updated,
I'm looking at the paper
Yep.
version,
Yeah.
not the
the link is the latest copy of that. So I will check that, and if it's not, we'll get it straightened out. We were not going to print all of that again. It's we did it as a link to read it electronically, and you can download it and print it from there. But it was, I don't think it was the intent of the facilities committee to print it again.
Okay, well, for anybody that isn't up on the electronic
Mhm.
side, the paper copy is very useful. Okay,
Understood. I think if you were to talk to
Yes,
Matt?
Mr. Watson, I can arrange for you to get the most up-to-date paper.
yeah, I've got some more
Capital
questions
assessment.
along with your presentation.
Okay. Yeah, yes.
So when you talk about these costs, like just to maintain the facilities, $25 million for maintenance seems quite steep. So for like, for example, on the science lab,
Mhm.
that would be no change to those science labs, and then for that $25 million.
That's correct. Yeah, the high school essentially comes down to taking the brick off of it and putting together a outside wall system that works in New England, replacing the windows and doors, stairways. The elevator isn't code compliant. That's what we say is just maintaining what you own. It's a large investment that if on an annual basis, if you got a CIP working through these 4 buildings, it would take you probably 15, 20 years to get it to work so that it's not this biggest jump through 5-year steps.
It seems like the totally said right around 60 million. It seems like so much money.
Yeah.
Just for maintenance to get not a single improvement.
No, well, we call it maintenance. You could call it improvements because you would be replacing window systems. So in a way, that's an improvement. It's in a way, it's also maintenance because windows wear out, roofs wear out. Yeah. So you also bear in mind, you've got 165,000 square feet at the high school, 140,000 here, 74, I think, at the complex, and 40-something thousand at Millville. So you're owning almost 500,000 square feet of building.
One thing you're talking about all the things that are wrong with the building.
Mhm.
What would be your opinion as to whether proper maintenance has been done over the last 10 years?
Last 10, I'd say you're on an upward swing pretty well. Probably more so in the last 5 to 6. Starting to see a concerted effort in the last 3 to 4 to get ahead of issues. But there's definitely a period where work that shouldn't have been done didn't get done, like replacing boilers at the high school, replacing big ticket items that are now going to
Still
be.
have not been done.
Yeah, the high school is kind of the poster child of a building that keeps going. In a lot of ways, it shouldn't be able to keep going. It's still running a lot of original equipment in that building. And you've got a good staff that keeps it going and keeps it clean and keeps it safe, but it's not at the standards of what a building should be right now. And it's in need of some money.
Well, that I think everybody can agree.
Yeah, and we can come back on any of these points. We can just go back and forth through the slideshow, but why don't we keep moving forward a little bit? Because the next piece of this was enrollment forecasts. And, we were a district of, at one point, this building was designed for 785 kids or something like that. It was designed for a big cohort. You also came through when the high school was the middle school, high school. So you had kind of that bump, and which virtually every New England town did. And so what we did was we had an outside firm do a enrollment projection. They also did it as part of a demographic study of both towns. So we were looking not just at what's happening with the schools, but what's happening with the towns. And there's a link there that will take you to that. And once again, if you want it printed out, we can do that for you. The hard part on this to take in is that you're projected to decrease by just over 150 kids, and you're 1,800 or something now. So you're looking at a decrease of hit or miss 10% over the next 10 years. And that's due mostly to you've got an aging population. Your median age is projected to go up by almost a year and a half in age. You've got an influx of kids between 0 and 9 years old, but you have a bigger outgo of kids between 19 and 25, so young adults. And those are typically the people who start families. So you're getting more and more empty nest households because those kids are moving out. You're having fewer and fewer seniors flip houses because your population's aging, and your reproduction rate, no offense personally to anybody, isn't keeping up with the number of kids who are moving out. So population's declining, and there's not the impetus for people to move into the town. It's not creating jobs. It's not creating businesses. It's becoming a bedroom community, a residential community to other places. And that's going to lead us to a decreasing population for buildings that were built for a larger enrollment than even you have right now. So this is age 0 to 19 projections. And you see right now we're about 3,300 people in that age group, and 20 years out, you'll be below 2,500 in that age group. And that's a 20-year projection. We're working on 10-year projections. At 10 years, you're already below 3,000. You've got 2,700 kids in that range. So you're looking to drop almost 400 kids in that age range. Now, that doesn't necessarily relate directly to the schools. 0 to 5 is typically not in your schools. And somewhere around 17, 18 is when you start to leave from school. So 19 generally isn't in school. And we use pre-K to 13 for districts because of the holdover for a couple kids on transition programs. And here I think we have 13, something like that. So that's enough, especially in a smaller school, to hold on to them. But those numbers get to be rather difficult for us. And you can see the lines at the bottom, the 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19. The 0 to 4 flattens out as we go out across this. So our youngest kids are going sloping downwards and then flattening out, and everyone's kind of flattening, and then out about 15 years, it starts to tail up just a little bit. But in population and enrollment projections, you can say 0 to 5 years, we can be pretty accurate, especially for school enrollments. 5 to 7 is kind of a guess. 7 to 10 is a real shot in the dark. So we know that in 0 to 5 years, we're declining in town. 0 to 7, we're still declining. 0 to 10, we're still declining. So we pretty fair, we're going to be going down in numbers.
I've been around in town for a great number of years. Okay? And if you go to look for why we have excess building capacity, this building is a good part of it. Because when we built this, we were told by the people making the projections that we had to have room for a great number of kids. Mm-hmm. The high school right now is under capacity because we took 2 grade years out and brought them in here, mm-hmm. Okay? And may very well have taken the grade out of the junior high, the elementary, and brought it in. Yeah. and the projections turned out to be wrong.
Yeah, turn of the century.
And
2020
I
was the
seriously question the wisdom of going forward with these projections. And my question is, there's a project for putting up 35 units of subsidized housing,
Mhm.
which may very well be 3 bedrooms.
Yep.
Okay? With those children, if that's approved, are those children in your projections?
Yes. If it was reported to the demographers by the towns as being a valid project, either in planning or in permitting, then they are accounted into this projection.
We'll have to see when they did the projection.
Is it?
The numbers you're giving us for both towns,
Mhm.
Blackstone and Millville combined, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Millville's not, I know what we're looking at, I don't know Millville's situation. Are you expecting any more growth in your town? Is that a fair question to ask?
No, not anything dramatic.
Mr. Watson said we have a project or two that's on the horizon, so.
Right. And typically, if they're built to be 3-bedroom, which is fairly unusual for market rate housing or subsidized housing, if it's built for 3-bedroom, that would have a bit of an impact on an enrollment projection. If it's built as 2-bedroom, the average return on kids is 0.8 per unit, not per bedroom. And for 3 bedrooms, like 1.2.
I can tell you one thing about a project at Castle Hill for 66 units, that I'll be very much surprised if you have any input into your studies on it at all.
Like I said, if it's on the town record and was reported.
Well, it's not on the town,
Okay. Yep, it's,
hasn't even been negotiated between the condo association
Yeah.
and the potential buyer.
Right.
So it's not on.
and that's why we wouldn't carry it, because you don't want to build a building like this again if it doesn't happen.
And that would definitely impact your projections as to potential future enrollment.
And the thing to bear in mind is if you looked at 1 or 1.2 kids per every 3-bedroom unit, and you built 100, you'd get 100 kids. That would be enough to drive a change in the enrollment projection. If you looked at 0.8 per 50-unit building, you'd be talking about 25 kids, which would assimilate into a building program and not have to be any bigger. It's 1 kid per classroom. It's the general thinking. So we will, when we get further in, we talk about the MSBA process. You'll have to update enrollment projections if and when you're accepted into the MSBA program. So this demographic study would get updated if and when you're accepted into the MSBA program. And then that gives all those projects 8, 10, 12 months further along, and they would then get picked up if they are underway. So we land on the 3 key issues. You have aging educational facilities, you got a decreasing student enrollment, and you've got a change in curriculum. And that was where we started to move into our third piece, which is how do you align educational facilities with what the data is telling us? So we looked at a number of grade alignments, and this once again was part of a facilities presentation on 10/27/21, and there was one additional configuration study here under 3D, and the configuration names are fairly self-explanatory. It's 4 buildings as 4s, 3s as 3s, and 2s are 2s. And we did the 4 building alignment because it's simply what you own now. It's what you're running now and what you're owning. So we take it as a baseline to see what we might be expecting as we move forward, and then down to a 2 building system just to see how might we best maximize enrollment and facilities. So these are enrollment charts, not projections of a full K through 12, but by grade alignment. And what we're looking to see here is the least amount of change from the left side of the grid to the right side of the grid in each one of those mostly horizontal lines, because that represents the size of the school. So the closer we are right to left, the less chance you have of ending up with a school like you have here that's about 2/3 used or 1/2 used. And so our grade 4A alignment solves that problem pretty well, but it presents us with a few problems. Our pre-K through 2 cohort, which is what's at Millville right now, is a little bit big for the way the building is laid out and is working. The 3 through 5 cohort is a pretty good size right through. That gives the kids enough people to interact with and to have some good activities. 6 through 8 is what you're running here now. It's a little bit too small. You don't get enough mass to get clubs going, to get extracurricular activities, to get good curriculum offerings, and the same problem at the high school. So I said this one's considered less desirable from an educational, logistical, and fiscal point of view. You're running 4 buildings. You're essentially running what you own now. And so if we pull that together, 3 facilities are underutilized. Middle and high school enrollments are too small. Millville's too small. Complex is too large. Hartnett's too large, and high school's too large. So we're not telling ourselves anything we don't know. This is what we're doing right now. We looked at 3A when we did 3A through 3D, but this is a pre-K 2 through 2, 3 through 5, and 6 through 13. And 6 through 13 is essentially building a middle school, high school, which is fairly prevalent, kind of west of Worcester. As you start to move out across the state and into the Pioneer Valley, there's a number of districts. We did Southwood, Tolland, Granville, moved to a middle school, high school model. And with some arrangement in the building, it provides a lot of educational opportunity for the kids, moving both up and down in terms of curriculum offerings. And clubs have a bigger chance of survival because of the cohorts that are there. What we see here, though, is that gray bar, which is the 6 through 13, on the left side is about 900 kids, and on the right side is about 700. So it's a drop of 200 kids, which is about what you saw in this building from when you built it to where you are now. Yes, sir.
I just got a text message from the town administrator. I think there's some people online who are trying to ask questions. Just so you know.
Okay. Yeah, there's Zoom screen.
Yeah, when we went to the full.
Yeah.
the Zoom
Yeah,
was
thanks for that.
minimized.
No problem.
I'm not sure we answered it.
But yeah,
And they can't hear some of the speakers in the audience, they can't hear. So I don't know if we can accommodate by maybe moving over to the microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Repeating the questions that are asked probably.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's coming from there. You can hear it. So, well, let's see if we can if Matt comes back with questions, we'll ask him, and answer them. But in the meantime, anything?
Tim is joining into the Zoom meeting to ensure that you get the questions.
Oh, okay.
And he's going to come out with the link.
Oh, super. Okay. So for our 3 school alignments, we're looking at working with at least 2 of the existing buildings and using the high school as a placeholder for the 6 through 13 or 7 through 13, whatever alignment that was. But we see, no matter if it's 6th grade or 7th grade as the starting point, we see quite a tailing off at that grade level between now and 20 years out, and trying to avoid or level that out as much as possible. So we're saying here that the same things for pre-K through 2 and 3 through 5 as for our current situation. And then the 6 through 13 is a little bit oversized for a couple of years, and then it gets quite a bit of a differential. So in this, we're looking at 2 facilities are undersized. Middle and high school enrollments offer good support for sports, curricular, extracurricular activities. Hartnett would be redundant in this 3-school scheme. It might not be in one of the other ones. And if you look through that presentation, you'll see the one where we looked at making this into a middle school, high school. And its big holdback is not enough space for fields and sports. So you would end up essentially owning this as a bigger building and owning the high school site as a sports complex. And so we're not addressing the idea of reducing what we're owning and maintaining. So we did two school alignments. One was pre-K through 5, the other was pre-K through 6. And this was running pre-K through 5, 6 through 13. And we're pretty steady left to right across the screen. And telling us that if our enrollments stay as they are, or if they flip and they go up an equal amount, we'll still have a well-sized facility, either up or down. That's what we're mostly looking for. And this
Can you go
one,
to that slide for a second?
Yeah.
In the bottom, you're showing a 34.8% increase in what year? 31 to 32? That student population? Is that inaccurate?
percent change,
That seems like.
15-year change. Yeah,
Okay, that's a 15-year change.
yes,
Because it says,
that's the total percentage change.
okay, because it
Yeah.
says 21 to 32. And I'm like, okay, so that year there, you're projecting a 35% decrease in the student population.
Everybody moves.
That's quite substantial. You know,
No, that's good to point out. It should be the same drop.
because I would say to the residents of both towns.
Yeah.
In 9 months, 9 years, if we're going to decrease population by 34%, may not make a substantial investment, may not be warranted.
No, that stays the same in each one of those. We should just be clear to say that's a total 34% change.
In the next 10 years.
I think that's 20 up to 30. No, 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
I graduated from this school.
Yeah.
I've got a good education here. The numbers don't lie.
Okay. So if we follow through on 2B, this maximizes this building. It brings it up to almost its design enrollment from the beginning. And we'll talk a little bit about, I'll show you how that works out. And it actually gets the high school back almost to the enrollment it was when it was originally designed for. So you're starting to, at least you can then understand the sizes of the buildings you're talking about. This and something about the size of what you have over there now, a little bit smaller than what it is. And the program that the state participates in has changed quite a bit in terms of what they expect you to have in the building.
Sorry, I asked another question. Yep. So that school opened in what, 1970?
I
So
believe
what was
yes.
do we know what the enrollment capacity was at that point? So you're saying, going back to the original enrollment, what was the capacity of students in 1970?
I have to go back to the plans to see if they put the enrollment on that.
Well, we're making a statement.
Well, what we're making the statement is comparing it to size-wise, what it was designed for. Back then, you're about 164,000 square feet. If you take that and compare it to MSBA guidelines, you would have about a 900 student enrollment. And there was not a statewide program that I'm aware of that set enrollment sizes by school for grants.
But the district should know what their enrollment was going back, because we would have that data.
Yeah.
I like that. If we could get that data, it would be helpful, because it'd be a fair comparison.
It would be, except for the fact that the programmatic requirements to the grant have changed pretty dramatically.
But we're making a statement here that we would be going back to the original enrollment, which was back when the high school opened.
Right.
So I'm just trying to get the numbers to put them in line.
And see if it is the right enrollment.
Right, because we're making a statement, but we don't have any factual data to back it up.
That's fair.
Okay, thank you.
And I think it's also probably more accurate to say we'll go back to the original grade alignment.
Right.
Greg, can I ask
It
a
was
clarifying question? Are you just asking what was the high school built for in 1969?
Yeah, so-
And you want the enrollment data from
Yeah,
1969?
so I think, Jason, it's,
just wanna
the
make sure I
school,
understand
the
your question.
school opened, what, 69, 70, I believe was the
Yeah,
year?
but I think the important part is the grade alignment piece, because when it opened, the junior high was there.
It was 712,
Yeah, 712.
712, so we would have that number for 712, because that's what we're looking for, and we're doing it, am I mistaken, that we're looking for that same alignment, 7 through 12, or we're gonna 6 through 12? 6 through 12, okay, so we're gonna add another grade in there.
Yeah, you would add a grade and you'll be in a much different building program than you would have been in the 60s. The 60s, we were building for baby boom and trying to build a much different student-teacher ratio, much different science classroom arrangements, and a much lighter extracurricular building program. Like now, and we'll talk about when we get to MSBA programming, they require they will participate in a grant if you build 2 gymnasiums, which you don't have over there. You've got the space down below, which doesn't work as a gym. There's a bunch of changes between how buildings were designed in the 60s and 70s and how they're designed now, if you want to maximize the grants. So we can compare enrollments just as a way of saying it's close to that. We'd be better off comparing grade alignments and curriculum offerings. And I think if you did that, you'd find that building was designed and built very well for the curriculum offerings that were then offered. It's not now. And so it's almost like comparing an old car to a new car. They're both cars, but are they comparable? Not at all, really. But we'll get the data for how many kids were there. I'd be interested to see what the numbers were. And then we can.
Because we changed the use of that building also, so.
Yeah.
Substantially.
Yeah.
So it'd be comparison wise.
Yeah, we can do an overlay. It's actually the next phase of this. If you get to a feasibility study, you have to look at reusing a building as part of that feasibility study. So once you do that, you'll get an idea of how much of the building actually falls into conformance with MSBA's guidelines, and it won't be. It'd probably be about 60% of the building, I would guess. And it's mostly the smaller classrooms, which won't work because they're not ADA accessible. So it's a never-ending vortex on those old buildings. It's who's going to hit you next in terms of what you need to address.
Not to derail anything, but Tim just informed me that he's been checking on Zoom and he said at this point, he's not getting any questions. So he's monitoring the Zoom session as well.
Okay. So that gave us a couple of places to look, and the one we suggested and the committee suggested looking further on was how do you fit this option for a 2-school option into these buildings? So this is the building we're sitting in, and we are in the center of the building drawing to the left side. That's the library. And if we take this floor and looked at putting grades 2 and 3 on this floor and special ed that goes with those grades, music and whatnot, and the grid up in the corner is part of the MSBA data compared to what exists in the building. So we've got no pre-K classrooms. The guidelines say you need 6 because it wasn't built for pre-K, so we're not going to have any. The classrooms, we have 33, we need 29. SPED, we have 18, you need 20. Science labs, you have 6, you need 0. So that you'll see what you start to take science labs and make them into classrooms. The science labs are a good size for a classroom as well. So on this main floor that we're on, we end up with one unassigned room, which is one of the tech ed rooms right behind me. And that's just arbitrary on my team's part as we fill in spaces. And would it end up being used like this? That's neither here nor there, quite frankly. You just want to make sure that you don't end up with classrooms that are outside of the building because you don't have enough. This is the upper floor. So put grades 4 and 5 up there and you end up with one unassigned space up there. And that is two things. It is either the ability to do a specialized classroom or the ability to pick up a growth in population. Because right now, between those two unassigned spaces, you could pick up on a 23-to-1 student-teacher ratio of 46 kids and not move your student-teacher ratios at all.
Fill in the right classes, in the right age group.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. They're not widgets. You don't buy like, I want 23 fourth graders. That never happens. It'd be too easy if it did. And then if we go to the lower level and we put pre-K through 1, down on the lower level, because by mass code, we need toilets in the rooms for pre-K and K, and we recommend them for grade 1. So if we get them on the ground floor, we can just cut that floor up and get all the toilets and everything working. And we end up with this building probably, when we design our program, elementary schools, we try for about 95% usability rate. And this comes up to just about 94, 95% in the way that lays out. And that's just taking population and plugging it right in. The gym is bigger than the MSBA would let you build if you were building a new elementary school. The library is bigger, the cafeteria is bigger. So you're getting a benefit by using this building for that age group by getting bigger common spaces. Yes, sir.
What's the cost to upgrade this building to come in compliance with what your design is?
I'll get to that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Good question. Oops.
He died.
Bummer. Okay, there you go. If you've been in town for a long time, this might look familiar. This is the site plan for the high school when it was originally built. And this is, it's interesting in a number of ways when we look at potentially reusing the site, because down along the entry drive, everything towards the bottom of the screen is a conservation area. So that's was probably created or modified by the creation of that road, and there's a cemetery in there as well. The track and whatnot are not handicapped accessibility the way they're laid out, but that parking lot to the lower right-hand corner of the drawing gives us hope that you could probably fit a classroom building on that side of that main wing. And that main piece is vertical and colored in, is the auditorium, the band room, the cafeteria, the kitchen, and the gymnasium going from bottom to top. And in the MSBA guidelines, you would not be compensated for building an auditorium of that size, nor a cafeteria of that size. So the thinking when you first start is preserving those, because you would end up with an auditorium of about 2/3 the capacity in round numbers, and a cafeteria, auditorium about 2/3, and the cafeteria about 1/2 that size. So if you can preserve those as you build a new building, you get those nice spaces that you would otherwise be giving up for a new building. And we put the start of what might work as a classroom wing that avoids that conservation area, and it runs the bus drop off to the left of the building where the classroom wing is now. So as proof of concept, we think it shows that you could get some good work going on that site and saving that core piece. And this is, once again, the stepping off point for the feasibility study. If you're accepted in, then you step back, you look at the existing building, and you figure out if you can use it, do you replace it, or do you renovate and add to it? And yep.
Maybe I misunderstood. Did you say we needed 2 gymnasiums at high school?
Yeah.
So what would be the concept of putting another gymnasium?
Right now, on this, as we were starting to develop it, it would be at the top of that black and white wing. So we were trying to see if you picture this as just how many classrooms can we get on one floor? So this would be a 2-floor wing, and it would get us all the classrooms we need, and then gymnasium at the end of that.
You wouldn't want to put a gymnasium attached to that gymnasium?
It would end up attaching over to the right side of the screen, not the left.
Okay.
Because we would try to get circulation between the fields and the building, because on a middle school, high school, we're going to want 2 entries and 2 bus stops. So we want student parking where the high school kids are entering is where we want the student parking, so that they don't have to go past the middle school kids with their cars. So that we would probably try to get to the north end of the existing site.
But that's near the fields now. That's the student parking is near the fields, unless
Right.
that's changed.
Yep.
So there wouldn't be any change in here.
Well, what we'd end up doing is most probably looking at getting the baseball field over there and the student parking over there and rearrange that end of the site. But that is the next step from this. You
No,
go,
I think, I know it's the next step, and I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, so-
But I think if we're having this discussion, I think we should be having this discussion. I just don't know where would you put the baseball field over there? Because you got the field hockey football field there.
Mhm.
And you have the student pocket, so where would be the idea of putting the baseball field? Because that's at a lower level on the other side.
The problem is that this plan is not the plan of the high school land as it currently exists.
Right, it goes off quite a ways.
Yeah.
To the right and south. Yep. Okay, I didn't break it. But that is where you step off. That's why you submit a statement of interest and say, we have buildings that we know need help. And the building we think needs the most help is the high school. And we would like the state to participate with us in studying a solution to that building. That's what the statement of interest is asking for.
Greg, just for point of clarity, the student parking is around the back and the side.
Yeah, it's a good point.
The staff parking is to the left. If you're looking at the building, it's to the left.
But then, okay, so it's changed then, the use, because the
Yeah.
student parking used to be to the left of the building facing it.
Now that's staff.
It's
parking.
in the back?
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. I think I've seen the building in use once because of COVID. So that gave us some faith that would work.
You just made a point that I didn't really think about until you said that. Is the state changing any of its guidelines now that we're coming out of the pandemic? You know, looking at remote learning, has that had any impact on the way they like to see these things built?
Yeah.
You anticipate that could be a conversation, I would assume?
I think what you're going to see is a push for outdoor classroom space where you can get outside of the building, and technology that is robust enough to not so much to anticipate another pandemic, but to start to eliminate snow days and sick days. So I think you're going to see technology come up a bit and outdoor classrooms get pushed. I don't think you'll see an increase in the size of classrooms, which is what we from the educational planning side were pushing for. They're actually quite generous all the way up through high school in the sizes of the classrooms that they'll participate in. At the high school level, they get back into the 850, 900 square foot classroom because you're not in it for that long. You're moving from room to room. So psychologically, it's not that big a drag on you. We would like to see them go up to 950 to 1,000 square foot classrooms at the high school level, but I don't think you'll get that. It's too big a jump in cost.
Thank you.
So that brings us to what happens next. So MSBA is an interesting group. It's, in my opinion, I've done school projects in probably 15 or 16 states across the country with various organizations. I think MSBA is one of the best that I've worked with. They are funded with a penny off the sales tax, and they are an authority. So in order to make them go away, you have to rewrite the legislation. And when they agree to participate in the building with you, they sign a contract and their money is on the table. So you're getting paid as you build. And the only person who can make it stop is the towns by not participating. So they are a pretty straightforward organization to work with, and they've got they've done some great work. They started with about $1.4 billion in debt from the old school building authority, who were the guys that helped pay for this. And they have paid off all of that debt for the state, and they've built about coming up on $16 billion worth of construction across the state since they came online in 2009 or 2010, somewhere in there. So they're a good group, and what we really like about them from the planning point of view is you can't move forward unless the Department of Elementary and Special Ed signs off on your program. So they will only pick up on a educationally sound building, which a lot of state funding agencies don't bother to do. So statement of interest, this is where everybody starts to wonder what happens next. The statement of interest is filed by the school committee and the school administration. And it is a non-obligatory filing. It's just this town, the school district telling the state, we think we need some help here. Then the state reads through the application and says either we agree or we don't agree. But it doesn't cost money to get to that filing of the SOI in terms of a bond or anything like that. It's an administrative step. After you file that, you get 270 days to move forward with it. So once it's filed and once it's accepted, you get 270 days. Let me correct myself there. And there's a number of steps and time. So the initial compliance certification is the school administration signing off that they understand what they're doing. Pretty formulaic. We could do that in our sleep. You have to form a school building committee, so the folks behind us can't be that committee as a whole unless they have the cross-section that the state requires, which is representation from each town, representation from various boards, representation from the schools. So generally you'll see the facilities committee will have a school building committee that will come from them, and it's slightly different than what we've been working with. Educational profile is a straightforward questionnaire. Who's in your district? What are you doing with it? How are you teaching? What are you doing? Then turns the corner, maintenance documents, enrollment goes back to the question that was asked earlier. Do we think that money's been invested wisely in maintaining the buildings? If it was from what I saw 6 or 7 years ago, I'd say you would not get accepted under that maintenance document and enrollment cert. Now, I have no doubt you would with the work that's been done. An enrollment cert is where you would update the enrollment projection we were talking about. Yes, sir.
The statement of interest doesn't involve any expenditure of funds. What would your estimate be of the need for funds to do that 270-day and all the steps that are involved?
Not much. It's public outreach to make sure that people understand what you're applying for. And because at 270 days, you have to vote to put your share of the money in for the study.
And what is the 200, what would be our share of the money going into the study?
The study would have a price tag of probably somewhere between $500,000 and $700,000. And if that is passed and you go forward with that, you would get your state percentage back as part of the state grant. So that's the only time that you are fronting the money, is when you do that first step in the study. So you would look at a public referendum somewhere within 270 days after being accepted into the program to fund a full-blown feasibility study for the building you selected.
Okay, and that funds, okay, the $500,000 or so, would that come out of the regional school district budget, or would that be forwarded to the town for appropriation?
That would be appropriation most times. Most of the districts would do an appropriation to the town, through the town. You don't have to. We've worked with districts that have funded it as part of a budget, but it would be a 1-year line item in the budget. So essentially you're floating 1-year bond. I don't think the state really cares how you get the money. As long as when you say you're ready to go, there had to be a vote by the town to continue, right? Because when you say we want to go, they're going to obligate themselves to a bunch of money for them. Even if it's appropriated but not encumbered, they will take from the money when they invite you in and you say we're going to go forward with this. They will take that money and encumber it. They'll appropriate it to you and encumber it so that it doesn't go to another district. They get really antsy if you go forward and you don't follow up on your half, if you don't do your side of the funding further on. They give you, I think it's 90 days to correct it, and then they boot you out and you'll be out for a long time. So it's a very deliberate process once you turn that corner on 270 days.
Is that something that has to go on the ballot or at town meeting?
Typically you would do, I don't know how you guys are. Most towns do town meeting and then a town vote. So you do town meeting to move it out to a townwide vote. If you do it that way, it's 2 votes. Other way around. And I didn't trip over it. Yeah. Yeah. It's however you get it to the end. You would typically in Massachusetts do 2 votes for the town meeting and then a town vote, because it would be a debt exclusion for that amount of money.
So we would have to anticipate based on our elections. We'd have to have a special election for this.
Typically, they fall into special elections, unfortunately. And a lot of times it's some towns like doing that because it focuses people a little bit more on what the real question is. Some towns like it tied into a general election because it's easier to get people out. And I know when I did Towland, south of Towland, Granville, we did it in either January or February. And Towland is 1,800 feet up in the air, and it was about -4 degrees, and it was snowing sideways, and 51 people came out and voted. So it was well played out there, but it was not on the general election ballot. It was tough. So this is a process, and the MSBA website has this all spelled out without my explanatory text that's taken from other places on their website plugged in there. And then, of course, what's it all going to cost? What's going to be projected to cost? So this graph is right from the MSBA website, and all the little orange dots and squares are buildings that have been built, and the project funding agreements were approved, the buildings were built, and you can see the escalation. The orange line that starts at 250 and ends up as the uppermost graph line is new construction. The purple line that starts below 250 drops down and then comes back up to almost be matching new construction is renovation costs. So where those lines end is completed work as of the end of 2019. So the project's square foot costs by year from January 09 to December of 2019. And then everything to the right that's in the larger rectangles, if it's orange, it is a funding agreement is in place. So that square foot cost has been agreed to by the state. If it's in blue, the last two rectangles are buildings that are under design. And you can see that these costs they keep going up. And
So we should add 30% to that cost.
there you go, that slide right there.
Okay.
So,
I got ahead of you, I'm sorry. Because I know we just went through some capital projects last year in the town, and we added 25%, so.
So here's what you see, up till December 31, 2019, the average square foot cost was $478. And you saw on that previous graph, it really came up fairly steady. Then between December 2019 and April 2021, there were 18 projects committed. It says April 20, but there's not much in between those two that affected. So we can say December 2019 to April 21. The average square foot cost jumped from 478 to 532, about 11% to April of this year. The 30 projects that are currently in design stage that have budgets that are in the hands of the state, that's the orange and the blue dots off to the right end, they average out at $608. So you're going from 532 to 608 in 10 months.
But isn't new construction around 700, a little over $700 a square foot right now?
Depends on what you're building and where you're building it. There's some on this chart. You see the upper end of that, there's some that are up above 800. There's two that are up above 800 as projected costs. There's a couple that are, three that are above 700. The majority of the projected costs in the schools are falling between 580 and 620.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference on those, the higher ones are either urban schools, and I think almost all of those are urban, either downtown Boston or Quincy. And or Lowell has a couple, or the tech schools. The VOTEC schools tend to trail a bit higher than general curriculum high school.
These are per square foot costs. Do those include the site costs that might not apply to this because we already have the sites?
Yes.
So the square foot cost would be substantially lower on that basis.
Yep.
Just
And
alone.
you'll see, you jump to this one. So this goes from.
Great ones.
Craig, Mary wanted to speak.
Hey, Mary.
Hi, I'll wait. If Greg, if you want to finish up with your thought, I'll wait. Are you all set?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so I agree with your costs. When you put those costs out initially, I thought they were low, and I am seeing prices 650 to 700 right now. But my question to you is, do these costs include FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and technology? Because we know MSBA only gives so much per student, and historically it's been extremely low.
So what Mary is saying is these square foot costs are the agreed and signed off costs from the state. So that as a square foot cost, that is what the state is saying that these buildings cost. Typically, they will not include costs that the town pays over and above the grant. So they are abysmally low in terms of furniture and technology allotments for by student. So at this point, for planning purposes, we're saying that this is all the square foot number that you're going to need. And then you would be working against either savings on site costs or savings on renovation that comes in a little bit lower, or an approach. And you may see less of a square foot cost for construction, but a slightly higher square foot cost for furniture. So there's a back and forth on this that once again gets run through at the feasibility study level. But if we take this, we're suggesting a $615 a square foot cost at the high school level. And that is not taking into account what you might save by not having to do sewer line. You would have to remove the water line because that runs around the back side of the building. You are going to be doing parking lots. You will be doing at least one of the fields over. But at $615 a square foot, you're about 97, just under $98 million for a new high school, which is just about the going rate right now. It's about what we would expect when we started, was somewhere between 80 and 100 when we started about a year ago. So as things change with the supply line, that's what we get. Anyway.
So a follow-up to that, Greg. I'm not sure how the timing will work, but the ARPA funds include technology, and perhaps Blackstone and Millville should work with Rep. Soder and Senator Fatman to see how we could use some of that money towards the shortfall that MSBA gives us for the technology in this building.
Yeah, there are some funding streams that can work to mitigate costs that are not in the or over the program, the grant allocation, but you also need to be careful when you integrate those in, because a lot of the funding agencies, MSBA included, will see that as a duplicate grant and will reduce their grant and offset it against those. So,
yeah, I know they do that with the Green Communities Grant and the National Grid incentives. They do that also.
Good question.
yes, sir.
So you added 2,000 square feet for district offices.
Yes.
So right now you got the A wing and you got the D wing, which is the auditorium, the cafeteria, and the gymnasium, right? That 157,000 square feet includes those areas right now.
Right.
So why are we using 159,000? Because you said we're gonna keep those buildings, that part of the building.
Right.
So wouldn't you decrease that number? Because we're really not renovating 157,000 square feet.
No,
We're gonna be doing much less than that.
what we did was if we could look at the high school where we had it laid out, it was taking the A wing, and administration is the crossing wing that comes across, and that's coming down in this scenario.
So you're taking that A wing out?
Yeah. And
So what are you gonna do with the nurses station and the administration?
everything gets rebuilt and moves over with the students.
So what do we do with the students? Why are we taking all that out?
Well, right now, if you were to build to the west of the building, on what is now the student parking, you would keep the existing building functioning while you built the new building. And then you would renovate cafeteria, auditorium, and gymnasium as you went through on summers. Pretty common approach. It reduces your cost because no one will pay you for modular classroom space. So you want to keep your existing building functioning as much as you can and build around and through it until you take it all down.
I guess I'm somewhat confused.
Well, the reason we stuck district offices in there in this building is they're not in this building now. There's a complex.
Right, but they were there.
Yep. And we We don't have enough room in Hartnett for the full suite. That's what we were hoping for, was to move district offices over here. But we don't have enough space at the current enrollment. So what we want to do is establish the worst case scenario, which means we need to find a place for the district administration. As you move through the feasibility study, that can change. Any of this can change from this stepping off. But you need to get to a point where you say, okay, this seems to be the direction we should go. And if the district administration office ends up fitting in here, then you would reduce the size of this building.
Why wouldn't we just add, instead of taking the A wing down, why wouldn't we just add to the A wing?
If by the A wing you're talking about that
Yeah,
administrative floor,
yeah.
the problem is it's right away the driveway.
Well, no, it ain't. I mean, it's existing now.
Yeah, but if you look at the site, if you went forward with the scenario that builds to the west of this, I'm going to do what I should never do because no one else can see me. The main driveway will come right through here, and that's your admin wing right there. Outside of the fact that the admin wing has accessibility issues and interior air quality issues and all the rest of the issues, you want the admin wing over near the classrooms. You want it to be part of the life of the students. So if you're going to move over to the west with all the classrooms, then you move your admin over there with it.
The numbers just ain't adding up. You've got existing part of the building, which you're incorporating in that 157,000 square feet.
It's the gym.
But you're not changing the gymnasium, you're not changing the cafeteria or the auditorium.
Right. You're renovating. Yeah, that's the full renovation. That's what we said in the explanation of this. It's to fully renovate them. You need to bring them up to energy code, lighting, indoor air quality. All of that needs to be done. That building needs to be renovated.
So why wouldn't we do that with the A wing? Why wouldn't we do that with the A wing?
Because it doesn't work for the way you're delivering education. There's not enough value in the A wing to justify keeping it. Unless you connect it to the B wing and the C wing and just renovate the building, which is what you would study during the feasibility study. Don't get ahead of the process. It's what you're doing. I said before, when
Well, I'm forward thinking it. I'm not getting ahead of it. I'm forward thinking it.
no, but you've got to get to the idea of submitting the SOI, getting through to a feasibility study, funding a feasibility study, and then you take those questions and you say, are we better off renovating this building, modifying this building, or replacing this building? That's the feasibility study.
The thing of it is that from an architectural standpoint,
So
that's
it's
great.
educational point.
Okay, we'll go to the educational standpoint. The flip side to that is we have to answer to the taxpayers of these towns.
Right.
Okay, and we got to be able to answer the questions and justify it. So, that's why we're asking the questions. I'm sure some of these are uncomfortable, but
No, it's not uncomfortable.
Okay.
It is the process. You do a master plan,
right,
which is what we're talking about right now. It's just a master plan, which district, which schools best fit the needs of the district. And right now we're saying probably Hartnett and at least part of the high school. Best address what you need for a district.
Okay, so you're proposing that Millville go to have no schools within the town?
If you follow this scenario, yes.
Do you think that is a politically acceptable to the voters of Millville?
That comes down to the facility subcommittee, which has representation across both towns. And it would be the issue as you move forward, absolutely.
I think that might be a very hard thing because part of the vote, you're going to have two votes. You have a vote by the town of Blackstone and you have a vote by the town of Millville. And if Millville doesn't approve the funding, it kind of blows a hole in the bottom of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
We've had discussions on that at the capital planning committee in Millville, and the thought is that we really like this blue sky, very futuristic looking with buildings and although it's not ideal not to have the building in Millville, I think that if we look at what the towns would get back for educating the students, it would be a viable option.
but it's,
And if anyone in Millville disagrees, please email me at selectman3@millville.org. I am always asking for feedback, but we have discussed this at capital planning and no one said, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this. It was kind of like, wow, this is a really very broad approach and like considering all the options. And we want to see that, like, here's everything we can do.
Just I know the problems we had in getting Millville to agree to allow the use of the school and to combine the first graders and
Yep. So I'm
the kindergarten, and that took many years to get through.
that was a different thought.
But we
That
did get
was
it
a
done.
different school of thought that I don't think
It was
is,
nearly useful.
that has changed since then, based on the new school, the new plan we have, the new regional agreement we have, which allows for free form access. So I think we've already changed that thought. Again, happy to take emails.
So,
Right, there's one question.
You know, I'm Jeff Silverstein from the Blackstone Finance Fund. I'm curious about, you know, I commend the idea of going from 4 buildings to 2. I am not sure that this particular approach is the most cost-effective one. And I think that it would be very important for both towns to do the cost analysis and see what would happen if you, for instance, I think you look cursorily at consolidating the elementary schools in Millville, where you have a huge site, although it certainly is constrained as far as expansion goes. But I'm wondering whether there's a way to upgrade or to build additionally on that site that would be ultimately much cheaper than trying to deal with the most expensive site, which is the high school site, because that would allow you to combine the high school and the middle school here and combine the elementary school there. And alternatively, would it be more cost effective to invest money at the JFK site, which is almost at the capacity that you need already? It would mean very little expansion, but a lot of renovation. And if you did that, then you could abandon Millville, and again, you could consolidate middle school and high school here, and then what happens with the high school at that point is a big question that the town of Blackstone has to deal with, because that piece of property could have a lot of commercial value, could be used for a number of different things. And whatever those things are, we need to know, because they may offset some of the cost of what's going on. But if you, for instance, did a JFK renovation and said, okay, we're going to consolidate the elementary schools at that site, I don't know what the cost would be, but I'm almost sure that it would be quite a bit less than the cost of rehabbing the high school. And then if you figure in the state aid, the differential between those two plans would be, I think, fairly significant. I don't know for sure, but I think those things need to be investigated. They need to be addressed by either by the school committee or by the joint committees. But we need to address those things as financial matters before we sign off on any of these plans.
So the October 27th show that is linked in this, if you put that in, you'll see where we ran through all those options. And there was a couple of things. The high school is your most physically intensive building to build. And high school costs for construction are a few percentage points higher than middle schools, a few percentage points higher than elementary schools. You could renovate one of the buildings in the district and get the state to participate with you. You will then go a number of years before they will participate with you again. So you have to go to the building that needs the most work, and you have to go to the grade configuration where you get the biggest return on the investment.
Yeah, you know what, I sort of disagree with that approach, because to me that sounds like your whole plan is to maximize state funding when it should be to minimize the total net cost of the towns.
So if you can't avoid the cost that the high school needs is to keep the high school in circulation. The high school needs big investment.
Right, that's it, and that's precisely, I think, what I'm proposing is to do plans that allow us to abandon the high school.
Right, so
And
which
forget
building
about
would you
those
do
ones.
first? If you did this as a middle school, high school, you don't have enough space for the fields that come with the high school. So you would have to keep some of the fields at least at the existing high school.
And I think the part that we learned doing this was that, yes, your statement makes sense that, we're maximizing getting the grant funding, but the grant funding is significant amount of funding and they'll only do one project. So if you have to completely redesign two different, because there's no other building that we currently, like, even if you wanted to put the high school here, not only fields, there's a significant difference. There's no auditorium. You'd still have to build another gymnasium. So it's still very significant dollars to change the footprint of here. And then you wouldn't be able to change the footprint at whatever other place other than directly impacting the town.
But the state aid that you're proposing under this plan will only apply to the high school anyway.
Right.
It's not going to apply to anything that you do to this building, and no matter which plan you deal with, I think there's going to have to be substantial changes and money put into this building, even though this is the best building that we have.
Yeah, so this building is about $6.8 million to renovate the downstairs. Yours.
Yeah, so my question for you is like with this whole process, now is there any way, or is it just cost effective or financially feasible when you go from 3 buildings to 2 buildings? Because you're talking about renovating the high school, obviously, because it needs most work, which is understandable. Now, what if you use 3 of the buildings to consolidate the school, so this way you can do a full renovation of that high school, so this way we're getting most bang for our buck. You're not using the full building, then when you're actually able to go through and renovate the whole building, instead of doing half, we're kind of cookie cutting and like cutting out and putting a little bit in, you know what I mean?
So I'm not sure I'm following where you would consolidate down to 3. We looked at a number of 3 building scenarios.
Which is understandable, like, it's not gonna work great, but for a short period of time, I mean, if that site's closed, you can still use the field, but you can work on the building. You're able to use the athletic.
Oh, you mean
field.
if you did it as a full renovation instead of a?
Correct.
Yeah, which is, once again, it's part of the feasibility study to look at, is it more economically and educationally feasible to simply renovate that building? That's part of the feasibility study. It's not part of the master plan.
Like Mary said.
Hey, Mary.
Hi. So I'm not sure if this is a question for Jason or who, but the program that has been developed and the outcome of our possible statement of interest, if we don't do anything, how does this affect our accreditation and the fact that we're losing students to school choice? I'm not sure if that's the right question, but if we don't meet the program that the state requires, which we obviously have to renovate to do, how does that affect our accreditation and our standing for our students getting into college and getting the scholarships they need?
Well, and we can even take it a step back from that, because that's a great question, Mary. But the issues at the high school, particularly around the asbestos, over time, if those are not addressed, we won't have a high school to open.
Right, they will shut us down.
That is in a very near future. So we won't, we can have these conversations for as long as we need to, but at the end of the day, we just won't be allowed to open the building. So, if we can't actually do the asbestos work that we need to do.
So if I could explain just a little bit without getting too deep, the asbestos remediation that we're doing is replacing ceiling tiles that are compromised, that are allowing the asbestos to enter the learning and the public areas. The deck of the school has been sprayed with a fireproofing material that is asbestos. And now over time, it's sprinkling down on the tiles. And when the tiles become loose, the asbestos get into the area. So the remediation that we're doing is a Band-Aid. Eventually, they're going to tell us, you can't keep replacing tiles. You got to rebuild or get rid of those decks. And you can't get rid of those decks without rebuilding.
That's right, Mary. And that's a very small piece of the actual project. Matt, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that or not, but.
But what we're looking at is several years out before these things come to fruition.
Mhm.
Okay, and the asbestos problem, we got the briefing several months ago as to what could be done to do it.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing we heard, and heard nothing else, no request for funds.
That's because we're
To
taking
deal
care of
with
this.
it.
We're taking care of this phase on our own.
Phase one.
Phase
So
one,
when we start the budget process, which will start in January and February and start coming to, you will hear asbestos phase two requests that will be a part of the next year, that will go into the May town meeting.
So something is being done on that.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So you're saying right now, every day, these kids go to school, we're exposing them to asbestos?
No, we
No,
did
that's-
phase
but that's
one where
what we're
we
saying.
sealed the
No,
tiles
we
they
didn't-
told us
those
to.
were- That was not what we said.
No,
What
they-
Mary was saying was that the tiles that were cracked, we had to replace to ensure that nobody was exposed to it. And we did that.
Yeah. So not to cause an alarm, they have hired a professional licensed site professional and a professional abatement consultant that has determined what they need to do to remediate this action. But at some point, it's going to be a bigger project.
The state has basically given us a hold right now because they're aware that we're interested in going through this process with the MSBA. So the state has mandated specific steps that we have to take to make sure that it's safe, which we've been complying with. But to Mary's point, eventually, so all the spray on above the ceiling tiles is the asbestos. We sealed off all of the ceiling tiles, so none of it can penetrate that barrier. So all of the students and faculty are safe, but eventually they're going to say, the fact that you have new ceiling tiles there, those are going to degrade again. You know, at some point, you've got to get rid of the asbestos, period. And that's going to be multi-million-dollar project within itself.
Right, and at the time, it was common practice. The asbestos spray-on was a fireproofing material that was good for schools and public buildings. But now over time, they've realized there's better methods.
If I'm understanding correctly, the number we saw earlier was like the $98 million, which was largely work done on the middle/high school. Is that
Yes.
correct? And there's also maybe some work with the HeartNet for about $7 million, is that right? Correct.
Mhm.
And then I heard earlier that MSBA gets involved in like, gets involved in like working on one building is all they would get involved in, they wouldn't get involved in a full suite of work?
Right.
They say they will not.
They will not, okay. So then my question, obviously you'd want them to help with the bigger, so that would be the middle high school, right?
Correct.
If I look at the report, and I don't know the schools, I didn't grow up here, but I thought the report says that the regional high school has several areas that are larger and more complex than those contemplated by the current MSBA guidelines. So would they even be willing to participate at this point?
Probably not. It's in the renovation of those. That's where the feasibility study goes in to see how to maximize educational opportunity and financial return. And that comment in the study is the C-wing, second floor, the connected science labs. If you get a chance to go through the building, do yourself a favor, go over and talk to Matt and get a tour through the building.
Okay.
And get a look at it. It's a series of interconnected science rooms and old home ec rooms, and some rooms are interior, they don't have windows. So square foot wise, it matches pretty closely the current state guidelines. From a educational and safety point of view, it doesn't. So
The
there's
$500,000 number that was mentioned earlier, I think it was $500,000.
right for feasibility study.
So we do the $500,000 study, and at that point, MSBA would say, we don't.
No, at that point, they've committed to participate with you.
Okay. So
They
once-
will work with you and offer their opinion of what the best solution is. And so they become an advocate the same way.
Can you just help me get comfortable with the statement here that, the high school is currently more complex than those contemplated by the MSBA? So this $98 million number, how much of that would be contemplated?
The statement that it's more complex goes to the educational, the building program when it was designed and built back in the late 60s compared to what they're designing and building now. Like the warren of rooms in the C wing is something that the state wouldn't contemplate building. They have a fairly prescriptive approach to science labs that makes them far more flexible and far more adaptable. But they end up being essentially rectangular 1,460 square foot rooms that share a prep room and share fume hoods and share pieces. And the current school doesn't do that. Getting it to do that would mean taking down all the interior walls. And if you're lucky, when you take down all the interior walls, the building will fall down, and then you can build a good building. I like the building too. I think it's a great schools from the 60s, but it's the courtyard is especially nice. So you can find a way to preserve the courtyard. It's a great fun. Yes, sir.
Do we have a, I guess, a plan B if the MSBA just says no?
Well, what they'll do is they will never say no on the SOI. They may not take you in this year. And so what Matt was talking about and working with the state on the asbestos issue, and what Jason and Matt have been talking about in terms of funding improvements and some of that capital investment work to keep the buildings moving forward is an anticipation of the state saying, we like the submittal, but you need to address these issues, or we like the submittal, but I don't know, pick down Lowell is more needy than you guys are this year. The good thing you have is that you haven't really hit the state up for a large construction project in 18, 19 years since you did this. And so they've participated in a couple of smaller projects, which we'll get to in a second, but you haven't really gone to them and said, we really need a building. We need a major investment here. The times that the town has tried, from what I understand, it didn't go in with the facility study, the maintenance plan, a facilities director, all those pieces that the state is looking for to know that you are investing in the maintenance and preservation of the buildings properly. Now you've got all that, so I think you're in a much better place.
You're guaranteed, it just depends on the timing and making sure you have all the boxes
Yeah,
checked.
and they built, I don't know, 800 buildings or something like that, 700 buildings they participated in across 385 districts. They're not kidding around. They are, as I said earlier, one of the best programs you could hope to work with. And they are very forthcoming with, if you're not accepted in this year, you'll know why. If you submit it and you're not accepted, they'll tell you why not. It's, they don't hold anything back.
But you'll be accepted the next year.
Generally, if you're not accepted and they can't tell you, they can't give you a defect in the application, then it's generally just that too many people were more needy than you were. And so generally you take and you reapply it the next year. But it's, they had relatively few last year. They've done as many as 30 in a year. I think last year they had 12, 13, very low. It was really low for some reason.
What is meant by like a defect in the application? And that's something we'd have to
Oh, you mean
put money towards to.
No, it would be something like, in the, your maintenance plan didn't address a particular element of the building. You didn't have a fallback plan for technology. And at the beginning of, when I was going through the MSBA process, and I said, the first one's easy, it's a questionnaire. The second one is, well, the first one is, do you know what you're doing, is the basic questionnaire. And then you jump over one, and it's an educational plan, which Jason and Matt and your school committee have been working on your curriculum and your approach to teaching. And that's what the state wants to see, is that you're not just building a building for 1960s education anymore. So your education has moved past your buildings, and you have an educational plan that shows you that. You've got a mission statement, you've got a strategic plan, you've got a facilities assessment, now you have a master plan. So you're set on that side of it. You've got a facilities director, you've got a recurring funding line in your school budgets for maintenance, and it's a realistic line. So you're going in the right direction. Now your next step is to come up with the idea that I got to replace an old building. I got to get the best return on that money. And through a year of study, it keeps circling back to the high school.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I had similar, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but total opposite of me. When I first started coming to meetings on the high school, like, why are we trying to save this building? It's so old. So wouldn't that would come out in the feasibility study, right?
Right.
Like, hey, we talked about renovating this building, but you know what? This is not the right thing to do. We need to go in this direction instead. And maybe it is that this becomes, so that would all come out though. So that would be a more in-depth look, basically, of everything you presented here.
You would turn and focus on whatever building it is you pick.
Mhm.
And you have to look at renovating it, partially renovating and adding to it, replacing it where it is, or replacing it on another site. So you actually have to go around town and identify other places where it might fit. Even if you go around town and go, it doesn't fit anywhere, you still have to do it.
Just to be clear, the beauty of that feasibility piece is, to everyone's point, we don't have a specific plan mapped out for exactly what construction might need to be done. The feasibility study is where they really determine what the best options are and where the best use of money would be. And once you get to that feasibility study, if you're already there, they've already accepted you into the program. So they're committing to work with you regardless of what that option is. It may be significantly less than what we're presenting here. To be very clear, what we just tried to present is almost a worst case scenario, an estimate, but we put the numbers in as high as we could think that they would go. But they may, during the feasibility study, they may say, no, move this here, cut back on this area, and it could come in $10 million less.
Are you going to need a vote from the town again after that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there'll be 2 votes taken.
You do feasibility study, then you do the actual
Project.
design and construction.
I have some major reservations about this entire process. Number one is people seem to be concerned that the buildings are underutilized. That is a wonderful problem to have. It's easily solved. You close the classroom door and you lock it, and you wait till the students arrive in 10 years to fill it up. That deals with one area where I don't agree with one of the fundamental problems that you're dealing with this problem and with the high school, okay? And number two, I read the study of the buildings, which I understand was done by your firm. And I also understand that you're a candidate to be the architect to go forward with the design of all these changes to the school system.
That's not true.
You're not?
The MSBA process also includes the selection of an architect.
Okay, but your firm is
Well, we would
looking
certainly
to
sit
do
down.
that.
I mean, I kind of like the place.
Yeah,
Right down the
yeah,
street.
your firm would like to do that. And what I don't see in the study of the buildings is some things have been completely ignored, okay? And on the roof thing is one thing. On the septic systems for the complex, the analysis ends with a picture of the pipe leaving the building. Okay, and that is one of the major problems, because part of the problem with the complex is a high water table. And I understand they had to pump the whole system out to make it work. So that is a definite impact there. But what I would have loved to see in that study is that you have comments in it that windows are broken, okay? The heating system doesn't work, but you never did a detailed analysis that you can build the cost of making changes to the system out of the studies of the facilities. It's just not there.
Right, because you did a facilities assessment.
You did a facilities assessment on the one, I took out my little jeweler's loop so I could read it. Okay, because that was what was needed. Okay, that's how I found that there was a discrepancy on that, on the roofs. But if you're going with this facility in the high school, okay, and both of these have sewerage on them, okay? The other two facilities are on septic. And that's a factor that doesn't come out of your facilities analysis. And that is a major expense that anybody has to look at.
Right, if you hold on to those two buildings, you have to maintain them. And that would be part of your annual maintenance or a semi-annual maintenance for a building with a septic system.
I would suspect for the complex, the solution might very well be like we did for the high school, is to actually connect it to the sewer.
Yeah, we've talked about that with this committee, if the complex were identified as a building to move forward with, what might it cost to connect it to the sanitary sewer system? And the MSBA doesn't participate in that. That's all on the town's dime. So anything, generally you're trying to avoid the buildings that have septic systems if you can avoid that as part of the school project, because you're paying for all of that site work. Anything off-site you're paying for.
So does the committee want to connect to sewer?
With the complex?
Yep. Is that the plan?
Not what we're, no.
No, I said we talked about it, if that building were to be the target, the subject of a major project, part of the consideration would be what would cost of connecting it. So you end up with this building in the high school because they're on the sanitary sewer system already. And they have the most potential for expansion, construction, reconfiguration, given the sites.
Sure.
The complex site's tough to work with.
No, and I think I won't speak for Mr. Watson, but I think what he's trying to say is we're trying to get the full picture of the impact financially across the board so that we have a good understanding of everything we're getting tied into.
Right.
So I appreciate that. That's the only reason I asked, is that the intent, because then if that's going to be the intent, I definitely would like to know what the price tag on that is.
No, at this point, that wasn't an outcome of any of the scenarios and alignments that we did. It was, if for every configuration that the complex stayed in use, it stayed at or below its design enrollment. So the septic system would still be within its design parameters.
It's within the design parameters, but just across the street from the complex is a good-sized swamp that I suspect is a good portion of your problem with the septic system. And if it's a matter of a simple high water table from a real estate person with 50 years experience, it ain't that problem's not going to go away.
Was there any consideration or looked at for the complex because that has more land? Was there any consideration versus the high school?
High school, if you talk about taking the complex and making it the high school, then that would be part of your feasibility study to look at what can you fit there, and can you make use of all of that land. The back part of the triangular piece with fields on it would probably end up being the site that you would build on. If I just speculate on how it would work, that way the complex could stay in use, the high school would stay in use. And then you would take down the complex, build your fields to the south side of the building, to the triangle of the intersection. And I mean, there are a number of ways you could go, and that's kind of the joy of the feasibility study step. When you start to look at where else might you build, you would look at that site. And generally, high school is looking for, at a minimum, 15 acres plus an acre for every 100 students. So if you start with 15 acres, some states start with 20, you can start with 15. Start with 15 and add 8 acres to it, you need 23 acres would be what you would go out and search on for a clean site use.
So at one point, JFK housed 3 through 12 at one point. So that's the only reason I bring that. And I guess my next question to the district or the school committee, is Blackstone's on a hook for the roof. What's the cost of the reimbursement? to the state?
That's coming.
That's all I'm asking.
That's coming.
Okay, sorry,
It's like,
I didn't get that far into the report.
no, that's okay.
My wheels are just turning. When you
Yeah,
start
there you
talking
go.
numbers, I get all excited.
If we go back to our slideshow, I think we've got just a few more slides and they're all about money. So we did Hartnett, 6.88, 6.9 million and $430 a square foot. I would imagine you might save some on that because of less site work, but we would be looking also to get a pre-KK drop-off loop so that the little guys aren't in the bigger mix. So this is total project for the high school, 97.8, about a 53.8 grant anticipated from the state, which gives us a cost to the town of 44 million. And then the cost of renovating Hartnett, about 6.8 million. Then you've got maximum project cost returns. So these are outstanding project grants from MSBA. The high school is 1.3. The Millville roof's about 700. JFK roof's about 800. AFM roof's about 400. JFK windows boilers 1.5, and the Millville propane's about 900,000. So MSBA reserves the right to claw back their portion of a previous grant. They don't say they will unequivocally do it, but they reserve the right to come back and get it. Yes, sir.
I just saw number 430 a square foot, but before that, we were looking at like 6 and change. How did we get back to 400?
400, mostly interior reno.
So the 600 number was just pure exterior site?
No, that's everything. It's building and site, a new building, or building and reno. The Hartnett, if you follow through the logic on that page, it's interior on the lower level of this building, not rearranging interior walls, but cutting the slab and getting toilets in those rooms and connecting out to the sanitary sewer. So it's almost all interior work, what we would consider about mid-range renovation. So new ceilings, new lighting, paint the walls, build toilet rooms, put in sanitary sewer, and essentially get it working for the little guys, 4 through 7 year olds. So smaller toilets, for the littlest kids, they're 12-inch tall toilets. And yeah, you don't want to sit on one of those. So it's an interior renovation defined over 16,000 square feet with probably about $30 a square foot on that is to get a drop-off loop for pre-K and K.
What's the number? 600 or 400 square foot?
No, it's two different projects.
Two different projects. Okay.
See, if I go back to, let's see, back up a little bit. See the purple line on the bottom?
Mhm.
That's renovation projects. And the gold line above it is new construction.
Okay.
So when the state started out many years back, you see where renovation projects dropped down.
Yep.
People were renovating buildings without much modification. And then it bounced up, leveled out, bounced up steeply again, and the renovations were getting more complex.
Sure.
They were starting to change buildings, and now it's tailing almost in a touch new building costs.
Okay.
Because the renovations are getting more complex. There's fewer people going in saying, I just need the same grade configuration. I just need to renovate everything in the building, but I don't need to structurally get into the building. But everyone in the Commonwealth, except for the cities like Lowell and Lawrence and Boston and Quincy, are showing declining enrollments. So you got a whole bunch of towns doing what you guys are doing right now, saying, how do I maximize my use in the buildings? And that's getting you into more complex renovations. So yeah, there's a bunch of us who think that at one point renovation and new are going to be the same number. But for this building, given its age and the layout of downstairs, I don't see us at 600. I see us closer to that sub $500 number. And as you move through your feasibility study, I would suggest that concurrently you study this building for its cost potential as well, so that when you get to a vote, you've got a good study of this building also. Because you can't do the high school without doing this building unless you want to run 3 buildings. Because then you would stay in at least one of the others. It's, don't go there. It's just not good. Yes, sir.
So JFK, KFM, and then the JFK boiler, right?
Yep.
We're looking at almost $2.8 million. How much of that, we're gonna have to return that whole $2.8 million? Should that be factored into the cost of this project?
So if you look at this one, total cost projections, it doesn't increase the cost of the project. It increases the money that you may have to pay back.
It's not a may, it's either a yay or a nay. There's no may. in
At this point, it's may, because the MSBA hasn't been asked, do you want the money back? When you get accepted into the feasibility study, they will come out and look at your buildings, and then they will make a decision on whether or not they want that money back. So at this point, all I can say is maybe.
Okay,
To
but
be clear, also, I apologize for jumping in, Greg. I actually spoke with the MSBA just a couple of weeks ago regarding this specifically as I was putting together some of these numbers. And the person that I spoke with said, you can't really start looking at there's a section of the statement of interest that's a school closure section. So you actually have to put in the information on any buildings that you are intending to close. And only after they accept the SOI, would they then come out and they do an assessment of the buildings that you are suggesting that you might close. And then they make determinations as to whether or not they would charge you anything or how much. So they're going to factor in how long has the building been in use since they gave you that grant? How, what is the building going to be used for? Or, how much, what is the district now doing and what's their master plan moving to? So to Greg's point, what we put together here is really like the worst case scenario of we might potentially have to give back all of that funding, but it's not a given.
well, I mean, to the point of both towns, we could be on the hook for $2.8 million. Right? Because my understanding of grant, and I apologize because I wasn't part of, is that if we change use, then they can come after us for the money. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
Okay, so Millville would be on the hook if they close the Millville Elementary School.
Yep. So each of the
It's
projects
built in.
are outlined in this chart. And what Greg was explaining is it's not technically us paying them back that money. What they'll do is if they give us a $55 million grant and they say what they're taking back $5 million, they're only going to give us a $50 million grant, which then just increases the side that the towns have to fund on their own. So it's similar, but it's not like paying out for those.
But the town is still paying that money back.
Yep.
Okay.
It would,
If we-
and that it's outlined. That's what I'm saying. The total costs are outlined in the chart in here
I think Lynn wants to jump in here and help.
per town, because each town it's not that both towns are responsible for everything. The towns are responsible for the buildings that they own and had allocated. So it's outlined. Sorry, Lynn.
No, I was just going to reiterate what you just said, Matt. We put in the worst case scenario based on the full grant percentages. I think we're getting an echo here, aren't we? So yeah, we built it in. There is a good chance that the grant percentage won't be reduced for the full amounts, particularly we're still looking at the 2005 issue that we did on the regional middle school, the new middle school, that I don't think, we're going to have to pay back as much, but we won't know that until we walk through the process with MSBA. So basically, I'm just agreeing with what you said, Matt.
I totally understand that, but when we're at FitCom and we're at the town's meeting, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna actively put that in as cost of doing business, because I have to plan for that, right?
It is.
Yeah, that's
So-
why we put it out there.
That's what's in there.
Absolutely, but what's not in there is that if they do take it away, all of a sudden now I have to go to the townspeople again without you guys being involved and have to figure out how to pay that back.
No, that is
No.
calculated.
No.
It's already calculated in there.
It's
showing
in,
it
it's
as
showing.
part of that money.
So that's gonna be part of it. It's gonna be built right in.
Yeah, it is. It's
And
built
then you
into
said
it.
they'll just take it off the top though. But then it goes
So
back
what
to the
you'd be
town.
Going back to the town with is, look, they didn't want that money back, so we don't have to, our 41 million is now 37 million.
I get that, but I think no offense meant, that's trying to be cute with numbers and that's not gonna, for me, that's not gonna fly.
But
So
there's
like,
no-
I'm going to assume that you guys, if we do this, that we're gonna have to pay back. that.
And that's what we're
we
assuming.
assume. That's what we assume.
That's what we're
We assume
assuming.
the same thing.
Matt?
Lynn, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, I think it's gonna be more pronounced on the, that we've already added that. You're gonna see a table forthcoming as a projected tax impact analysis. And it's based on the assumption that the 55%, so that's what we're expecting. It could be more, a little more, but we're going to the worst case scenario, 55% grant reimbursement on this new project may be lessened to maybe a 50% grant because of the give back, if you will, of the private previous grant proceeds for the other projects. So it's not going to be like the member towns have to go back and now come up with money to pay off the existing projects that have already been financed. It's just going to be taken off the grant percentage of this new project. Again, but speaking to your point, yes, it would then cost the member towns a little bit more money because they won't be seeing that full grant that they could have received if
But
they
to
had
be-
no other.
To be clear,
project
there's two
company.
people. I'm sorry, Lynn.
I understand.
The statement of interest, so during this, so we'd be going to the towns and asking for money for the statement of interest. And then once the statement of interest begins, that's when MSBA would determine whether or not they're taking back any money or how much they are. So once the statement of interest is done, we would, no matter what, have to go back to the towns for the second.
The feasibility, man. The statement.
I'm sorry, not the statement of interest. I mean feasibility study. I apologize. Once we were done with the feasibility study, we then get the full cost. That would include whatever MSBA is expecting to come back. And then they wouldn't be going back to the towns another time. It's all part of during that feasibility study. We develop what an expected cost is. But for this presentation, just to give the towns an idea, we factored in all of those funds being taken back by MSBA. So the costs that we're showing are worst case scenario.
And those costs, man, on that slide there, the current amounts outstanding on what was provided by MSBA.
So there's two different slides, which we'll get to the second one. The first one shows the breakdown of this, like, let's say we go into this new this new project. It shows the breakdown of the project between the two towns. And then it shows each project that each town has had that they potentially would have to give back money to MSBA. And each one of those is clearly outlined and it's the total.
I think your terminology is what can be confusing. It's really that MSBA will net out the amounts and pay you less, right?
Correct.
Just so it's clear on that slide 42 that you showed briefly, it doesn't include the Hartnett Middle School costs in that allocation. Is that correct?
Correct.
In addition to that's just the high school cost on that slide.
No.
I don't see Hartnett anymore.
Yeah, Hartnett should be off in 2 years, 2024. So it should be done with that by the time you get.
No. What I'm talking about is the 6.8 million is in that slide.
Yeah, no, it is. It's totaled in.
My math doesn't show that, so.
Yeah, can you go to the,
Can
we go to the
Can
slide?
you do a split screen, Jeff, or no?
It's not, I don't see a total in there either. 44 million, add in 6.8 million, you're at 50 plus a couple million in the bottom. You only got 43 million. But 6.8 is not in this, but that's not really part of that project.
It's not part of that project. It's not in there for determining the
The only
cost
thing
of
that's slide.
that overall for this plan.
Time. Oh, Yep, correct. yep, I understand. I apologize. Yep, no, yeah, not the.
It's on the next one.
On slide 42.
Cost, and just adding in all the money, we just have to pay that.
Mhm.
And not splitting it for 6.89.
Right.
That's gone up 43.
So. Well, I could do a revised, I could do a
Well,
revised.
yeah, I'm just making sure. right?
Yeah.
You are correct.
But the next slide here showing all of the money that's outstanding for projects. And then that last slide there is showing a level debt projection on a 30-year bond for the overall project and its impact for $100,000 of assessed value at the current mill rate. Now, across the payment. So you can do these in one of two ways, either level the debt or level the principal. Level debt keeps your annual payments much closer year over year.
So if you have a $300,000 property in the town of Blackstone, it's 164 times 3.
That's correct.
That the
Yes.
unit property owner would have.
That is correct.
Yeah, which,
Correct.
Blackstone, Blackstone's 335.
Yeah, so typically you can show this one of two ways. You can show it by the average cost, you can show it by 100,000. 100,000 lets people do math for their own house a little bit easier than trying to back out to average tax rate.
So you do it just on the mill rate, tell them how many pennies did the rate go up to pay this? And then I used to be the tax assessor. I know.
So that is the last slide that we have there. It's a ton of information that I would never expect everybody to take into one night.
Is that debt service, sorry, just to be clear, the debt service include the Hartnett? Do we think, or was it based on the slide 42? So the numbers might.
Lynn may know that.
I have to check in.
What's the question? I can't hear it. There's a lot of.
Did your debt service include the entire project, including the Hartnett work?
Everything. This is all in. It includes all in.
Okay, thanks, Lynn.
Can I also just kind of volunteer one thing is that when the district approves the feasibility study, okay, just say it's the 500, 600,000, 700,000 that you mentioned. In the financing world, that's considered a study that can only be financed over a 5-year period. Unless the construction piece is later approved. So I just want to let people know, because a lot of people get surprised by the fact that they'll go through the feasibility study and maybe the construction won't pass. Those funds for the feasibility study have to be paid off over a 5-year period. So that catches some people a little bit by surprise. But just knowing that you'd be on the hook for financing that feasibility study for a 5-year period if you went back to town meeting and the member towns did not pass the construction portion.
But if they do pass construction, it goes into that. If they don't.
It rolls into the 30-year amortization like the construction.
Yep, got it.
So just so we're clear, we did a quick Zillow. I'm pretty sure it's $330,000 is the average Blackstone. I think it's actually higher. We just did the assessments, but that's $542
Yeah.
a year for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's $800 for Millville.
Right.
So the feasibility study would be $520,094 for Blackstone and $179,006 for Millville. That's the breakdown. That's the appropriations you're gonna be looking for. On top of what you're gonna add the cost for this asbestos of what, how much is that number gonna be that we should be phase two?
Say what you said about the feasibility study?
Yeah, the study,
Say that again, just so I
you
can.
said it was 700,000, right?
Approximately,
yeah.
yeah.
Approximately. So if I break it down based on student population, I got 520,000, let's call it even, 520,000 for Blackstone, 180,000 for
Oh, I
Millville.
see. I wasn't sure what the numbers, you were doing you were doing the split between the two.
Right, I'm just giving the
Okay.
two towns for what the
Yep,
exposure
Yep,
is.
I wasn't sure what that you were wasn't sure what the 500 some odd thousand was relating to,
It was based on the study.
based on the, yeah.
And then what are you gonna be looking for the asbestos, because that'd be another number we need to factor in. Is that gonna be a one-shot deal to next year's budget, or is that gonna be repetitive over the next couple of years? What are we looking at? Or is it too early to ask that question?
No, they gave you the figure last.
So we gave it to
You
you.
gave it,
It's like 200,000 this year. And they split it up. It was like 200 one year, 300 the next, or
Okay.
somewhere around that.
I missed it, I'm sorry.
Is some of that feasible study, did you say
Yeah.
we would get some of that back? We just upfront it?
If you go into the entire program.
Yeah.
It rolls in and becomes part of grant eligible.
Got it.
give me 1 second.
If we get pushed out of you, do we earn interest on that money that they hold on to?
So I'm sorry, I was trying to pull up the actual document on my phone. So what we presented earlier was it would be $195,000 for the summer of this coming summer, 22, which would be FY 23. So that would be part of the FY 23 budget. And then after that, it would be the third summer was $175,000 in the proposal. Yep, and then there at the bottom, yep, there's also monitoring that, yeah, that's the actual work that the company would do to seal the tiles or replace the tiles. And then there's an additional, it looks like
28 and 26.5.
Yep. So I don't have my calculator.
But
10,
You're hitting this
38,
There's the way, so my
like
next
60,
question,
about 60 some odd that, like 60
So,
some odd thousand.
is there a way of holding them off, instead of throwing out 195,000 next year? Is there a way of holding them off a year because we've submitted the statement of interest? And do they give us a buy? So we don't, I mean, we're gonna throw, it looks like we're throwing 200 grand away. Is there a way to hold them off? Considering that we go to the state and say, hey,
It's definitely a possibility.
Mhm.
I can't say that they would necessarily agree to that, but we have been working with a consultant. In fact, Mary also knows the consultancy group that we've worked with. And we do frequently communicate with the state, and they definitely would entertain a conversation about that. But I can't say definitively. They probably, my assumption is at some point they would want to know where things stand with respect to, are we submitting a statement of interest and have we not been accepted into the program?
So what's the timeline for that? So the statements of interest are due in January.
January through March, April, May. I think they set it for January through May this year.
If we show that we're, I don't know why this is not going, if we show that we are actively participating in a statement of interest and that we're going to take an initiative to renovate this building, they won't make us pay for these additional costs. They will work with us to keep the students safe and not force our hands to renovate everything right now, but the abatement.
Could I just ask a question? If you could speak to what would the town do, speaking from Millville, when it gets back MES, for example, under this scenario, which, many could view as an opportunity. It's a challenge, but obviously an opportunity. What if you've experienced this with other communities where they've freed up a school, what are they typically doing? How's that work?
Smaller communities tend to consolidate public safety, police, town hall, that type of stuff into that building. Larger communities will, and in this case, it could easily be Millville Blackstone as a comparison, may look to senior center, senior housing, market rate housing, anything like that. So there's been some discussion at the subcommittee meetings of MES may actually address a bunch of Millville needs at a much more advantageous cost than the town. Blackstone, not sure what its municipal needs are, but the complex has a bunch of amenities that would be nice in market rate housing complex. And there's a number of pieces there, which I've spent time as a town planner for various municipalities, and I never want to see a project go forward that doesn't address all the threads. And those two buildings are certainly have been part of the discussion with this subcommittee and would be at the town level would definitely have to be addressed. It doesn't. You can't just close a building, and to your point, you can't just close a room. You still have to heat it. You still have to maintain it. What you save is staffing costs. But closing a building is a $50,000 to $100,000 a year question just to hold on to it. So you need to have a use for it.
So I'll jump on that, Greg. After the school department, the school committee declares it surplus, it comes back to the town, and we can hire a consultant or professional to decide what the best needs are or uses are for that building and move forward.
So, as Calvin and Hobbes used to say, I need to go home, my brain is full. We had the ability to learn this over a whole bunch of months, and I really appreciate you guys sitting here and paying attention to a whole wealth of data. But I'd invite you on any questions or follow-up or whatnot, I'll get them back over through you, Matt.
Sure. Yeah.
And keep the conversation going. This is always the hardest night to work with a town because it's a huge number and no one's ever expecting a number of that size. And it's a real reality check. But there's a bunch of information and data that's been developed, and as we move forward, we'll keep at it to make sure everybody gets to the right answer. Yes, sir.
I think I was operating on the assumption, I think it came out that the statement of interest had to be in before the first of the year, but that is not what you were just talking up until the springtime.
Yeah, it always starts sometime in January, and they set, typically it's January to April or January to early May. There's been 1 or 2 years where they've shortened it up for whatever reason. But what did they tell you?
They said January to April.
January to April this year, the first 4 months of the year. And then they will generally set their invited list somewhere between late Q2, early Q3 of the year. So like they close it in April, you would generally know if you have a chance of getting invited in by the fall.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done.
So I will appreciate receiving any feedback either through Matt or Sarah or myself. We do have next Thursday a public hearing scheduled. So it's important that we get feedback from you if there are things we need to address and make sure we're clearer or more concise, or the numbers include all the projects. We need to get this right so that we come forward with the best information we can as a school committee. So we welcome thoughts, feedback, suggestions, whatever you have.
Okay, if we're going to be you're going to be holding a public hearing, do you have a draft of the letter of interest that you are thinking of sending forward so the people at the public hearing can at least read it?
Statement of interest is anywhere from 40 to 100 pages long and includes a whole bunch of data and
Yeah, but the answer to my question is a yes or a no.
No, you wouldn't have a statement of interest here
Okay.
at this point because you're just stepping over that line now to start assembling that.
So we're having a public hearing and nobody knows exactly about what we're proposing to do.
Well, not nobody knows, you know, it's in front of you. And that's what we're trying to get, we're trying to use this as our jumping stone to start getting the information out to folks, to get them, to help them understand and see what the thinking is out there.
And to be clear, Mr. Watson, the public hearing is just with respect to whether or not we submit the statement of interest. It's not a vote on allocating any funds or committing to anything. The school committee just needs to decide whether or not they're going to have the school administration and the district submit this statement of interest. That's why it won't be there.
And
5:30 on here,
here, 5:30 on what day?
Thursday the 9th.
Thursday the night?
You think that, can I just ask you a question? Do you think it's fair to the public to have a public hearing at 5:30 when people are getting home from work, they're feeding the middle of supper? I mean, is that a convenient time for the public? I mean, think about that for a second. When we have a selectmen's meeting Tuesday night, so we'll bring it up on the good and welfare to let the public know for the residents of Blackstone on behalf. But I don't know the thought process was behind a 5:30 meeting for a public hearing on such a large ticket item when most people are getting out of work, or they're trying to feed their kids, trying to put supper on the table. I don't know what the thought process. You might want to rethink that and maybe change that time. I mean, in fairness to the residents of both towns. Because I think you should rethink it.
And while I can understand the 5:30 timeframes, there's a lot of nights that I rush to get here for a 5:30 meeting, trying to take care of my own kids and my work life. There's also the other side of it. You want to make sure there's enough time available that those of us who put our kids to bed at 8:30 or 9 o'clock or 9:30 can still be part of this entire discussion and be able to put our children to bed at a decent time as well. Because that's the other factor of it. If you push it later, now your end time is a lot later.
So let me ask you a
You
question.
kind of fall either way, though.
Think about what
You're
you
not
just-
gonna be able to hit everybody.
You're gonna fall in, you just gotta decide which side of the sword you want to fall on.
How much attention they're serving supper to their dinner, to their children, correct? How much attention are they going to be paying to this meeting? I mean, let's all be fair. So I just don't think that, no offense, I just don't think you give a lot of thought process to that. I would go one step further. I would kind of rethink that a little bit, maybe tweak that time a little bit.
I think that last statement was unfair, and I'll leave it at that.
And then
I think that was an
let us
unfair
know, 'cause-
statement to make, to say that we haven't given this a lot of thought process. I think that was very
let
unfair.
us know so that Tuesday night at our selectmen's meeting, we can at least let the residents know in Blackstone about the time so that they can tune into it.
We'd be happy to do so.
Thank you.
So
Got
we are still in an open meeting and we can certainly consider that at this moment in time. Does anybody feel that 5:30 is
Our regular school committee meeting is at 6.
6 PM?
Unrelated to the time, Jane, if I may, unrelated to the time, I would like to thank all the members of this subcommittee that have spent many nights coming here and volunteering and listening to the DRA and working with this committee to get this project to this point.
So thank you for all the time and dedication. the
Yes.
subcommittee has
Thank
put
you,
in.
Mary. It's so echoey, it's so.
I know, I don't know why it's so echoey.
Yeah.
It's been good to this
5:30?
point.
5:30?
I say
I think a half hour is
5:30.
gonna make a difference.
If you're coming from Boston, it's going to be hard to get to. You just have to get out of work early.
We have the Zoom option too.
Well, it will be live stream.
Oh, yeah, we do that.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay, all right, so 5:30 next Thursday. All right, anyone else? Motion to adjourn?
My motion.
We have to close our individual meetings.
Yeah, you guys have to close yours as well. Yeah. So moved.
I get a motion to close the,
Yeah, we're just.
do I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.